Now, Taylor, since a lot of my readers probably aren't familiar with you, could you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Congress?
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for the chance to be able to join you and your viewers. I've really enjoyed reading and watching your work, so just grateful to be here. My name is Taylor Wettach. I'm a seventh generation Iowan, born and raised in Muscatine. My mom was a preschool teacher, dad was a family doctor, and just really immersed in the community and benefited growing up from the great Iowa public schools that we had and really phenomenal healthcare and opportunities going forward. I chose to be an attorney, focused on trying to make sure that we can maintain fairness in a society and an economy that works for all of us, focusing on economic security, human rights, and the rule of law. I think as you are aware, I left my firm that I was previously at with when they came under threat and made a deal with Trump. And following the election, I've been working with a lot of folks in the community of Muscatine and seeing a lot of the challenges that my family is facing, that other folks are facing, from trying to decide if they can pay for medicine or put food on the table, historic affordability crisis, threats to social security for our seniors, veterans benefits being taken away, and all these things, and thinking about how can I help rise this occasion and help get in the fight and support people, and have a community that is going to be there for my children and my children's children here in Iowa in the future. And as I talk with a lot of folks that I've been working with and folks I respect, they encouraged me to consider running against Miller-Meeks, and in particular to try to bring new voices, new ideas to this fight, and also to make sure we're expanding representation and having a full representation of all the diverse communities in our district, including both the urban areas and the rural areas of the district.
Can you just clarify, were you practicing law in Muscatine or did you move back to Muscatine after leaving the firm?
Yeah, so I returned fully to Muscatine after leaving the firm, but I had been spending a few years working on legal matters in DC, negotiating against the government, standing up to large corporations and all of that. But during that period, was often back and forth and was working remotely with a lot of folks here. My wife and I got married in April, and we're excited to move back full time to Muscatine to be with our family and to raise our kids, and are just excited to fight for the community that we are looking forward to leave to our future kids and grandkids in the future.
And are you practicing law now or are you sort of full-time focusing on this campaign?
Having had to leave my firm when I disagreed with the decisions that they made to capitulate to Trump, I am unemployed other than focusing on this fight and fighting for people, which is a hard place to be. But the realities of running a campaign, I've discovered, are that you have to be fully immersed in it. And for us, it's so important that we're talking to everybody all across the district every day, and that's something we're really committed to is just working and connecting and listening to people as much as we can.
I know it's not always compatible with a legal practice to be active in politics. I was just wondering if you've been active in Democratic Party politics before, or have you run for office before anywhere else?
Yeah, I've not run for office before, but I've been involved in Democratic Party politics since I was a kid. Was my kind of political education was being in the caucuses here and
Mm.
helping out with the Obama campaign back in the day, and doing all of that. Then continue to be involved with the Democratic Party from that point onward. And then part of what happened that with folks that encouraged me, based on the relationships that I've had here in Muscatine and in the surrounding area, was that I have been working with the local party following the election, the sad election losses that, of course, took place across the district, Iowa, and obviously our country, to try to draw more support for especially ideas we have for getting younger folks out, for technology and infrastructure and things like that. So, have been lucky to learn from lots of folks that have come before in terms of what we're trying to do to give back to our communities.
I love Iowa caucus stories. What's the first caucus that you remember attending, or was it the
Oh
Obama
boy.
year
I
caucus?
mean, it was it from actively it was the Obama years, but I think I I'm sure like you and like
Yeah.
so many other folks, I grew up with this kind of expanded consciousness of what that could be because of growing up here. Like I remember I remember going to the Gore Lieberman rally in
Hmm.
Muscatine, I have a sign that I
Hmm.
got signed by them back in the day that's in
Oh,
my
fun.
bedroom.
Uh-huh.
And that's probably kind of the beginning of that. But I remember like growing up, just across the street from me, I had adoptive grandparents,
Hmm.
and it was a retired farmer couple. And my mom would leave me there. We'd watch CNN together with Grandpa
Hmm.
Al. So that was probably the beginning of my political consciousness. I remember they polled us in kindergarten, asked us like, who's running in the election? People said Clinton, they said Dole. And because Grandpa Al was this libertarian farmer, I was like, Ross, don't forget Ross. So anyway, yeah, I guess that's Iowa, right?
That's fun.
You grew up in it, right? And
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my first caucus that I attended was in 1988.
okay.
I was for Paul Simon, but my parents took me to the Republican presidential debate before the caucuses in
Mhm.
1980, the one that Reagan skipped. So there was an empty chair there. So anyway, I have a kind of long-standing interest in these what I call mid-sized cities, what some people would call micropolitan areas, places like Muscatine, cities with a population between 10,000 and roughly 30,000, where we've seen declining Democratic performance over the
Mhm.
last 10 or 15 years, especially. And what's your theory, since you're deeply rooted in one of those communities? Like, why are Democrats not doing well, and how can that be turned around?
Yeah, I appreciate the chance to give my 2 cents on it. I think one thing and you know this as well as anyone, the details of this, but when other people talk about it, they often talk about towns like Muscatine as if they're red, when they might be, 53% red and then 47% blue, right? But we often kind of aggregate in that way. And, I think a lot of it, from what I've seen, just talking with people, including people that voted for Trump or voted for Republicans and have expressed a real openness to voting for Democrats, is a feeling that the party is not there in terms of being on the ground with them, actually talking with them, going out there. I think that one thing that does happen is obviously we have to make resource decisions, and the party makes resource decisions, and they decide they're going to spend time in areas that are more reliably blue and spend less time in the rural areas or in the areas that are the kind of smaller, the mid-size mid-size for us in Iowa,
Hmm.
towns. And so I think a lot of it is kind of just not being there because of decisions that are made, and then that runs down the down ballot. So when the races that are higher up the ballot don't spend as much time in those areas, the resourcing doesn't get carried forward, and then the folks that are trying to run as Democrats in places like Muscatine don't have as much that they can ride on for going forward. So part of it, I think, is that kind of strategy and the resourcing thing, which obviously is a challenge. But I think more can be done if we actively spend time there. I think beyond that, then it's actually making sure that the policies that we're leading with are directly reflective of the interests of folks in these areas. We need to be really careful not to end up bringing in policies that are going to get kind of pasted on the district or pasted on Iowa, but actively built from the ground up, right? So I think one thing in particular we're really focused on is this crazy tariff economy. This should be a bipartisan issue, and it is if you talk to farmers or small businesses in places like Muscatine and Muscatine County, the rural parts of the county. And it should be something we should be hitting hard on. That fact that, our farmers' markets are being destroyed overseas. Small businesses don't know if they're going to be able to plan for the future, today, tomorrow, the next day. So I think, beyond the resourcing and actually spending time talking with people, policies that are more directly responsive in terms of how we're working our messaging is going to help us be more effective in winning, but also really most importantly doing right by folks in these districts in these areas.
The first district just happens to have a lot of these towns, so
Yeah,
Clinton, Burlington, Keokuk, Fort Madison, in addition to Muscatine and Newton as well.
yeah.
Indianola, I might even put in that category. So have you already started going outside Muscatine? Have you started talking with voters there, or how is that going for you so
Yeah,
far?
yeah, yeah. I appreciate the chance to discuss that. This for us is part of, again, how we ended up doing this. It was conversations with folks that said we wanted something that is more grassroots and focused, really driven more from the ground up, and is listening to those areas and the more rural areas more broadly beyond the kind of the cities that you point forward. So we've been, way out of Muscatine. We've been out west in places like Warren County. We've been down south in places like, Des Moines. Des Moines County, further to the east, and Scott and the more rural areas of Scott as well, and are working, further beyond that. We're going to be in, up Clinton next week, and are going to have a full tour that we're working to put together across the next couple months. So really excited to spend time talking with people. But it's reflective. What I said before is really reflective across the board of what we keep hearing is that they really want, folks really want uh, people to meet them where they are and to build policies directly based on their concerns. And we're confident that if we're doing that, then we'll be able to be that much more effective in standing up to Miller-Meeks in 2026.
One of the fault lines that I've seen this year in Democratic politics, it happened in March with that government funding bill, where most of the House Democrats voted against that bill, and most of the Senate Democrats did too. But
Mhm.
8 or 10 Senate Democrats voted for it to prevent a government shutdown from happening. And
Yeah.
so there was a lot of argument over whether that was capitulating or appeasing the Trump administration. And where do you come down on that? I mean, if you were in Congress, President Trump will still be there. So, how do you feel about this kind of brinksmanship? And do you think it's ever appropriate for Democrats to vote against a government funding bill, even if that leads to shutting down the federal government?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really appreciate that. I think there are obviously areas that we can work on in a bipartisan way, and we should work on. Like I mentioned, trade policy is one great example of that. That should be uncontroversial. And there are things even, for example, in what I think is the big bad bill in terms of not taxing tips and some of the stuff on Social Security. So there are definitely ways that we can stand together and work to build things out. But when it comes to things like where we're going to be put against the wheel, I think where we said that, well, if we do this, they can do whatever they want in that period. I think, my decision to quit my firm speaks to how I feel about those sorts of things. We are at a point where I think if folks aren't ready to stand up and push back on the most important matters, then what do we stand for? And so, there are areas that are absolutely ripe for bipartisan compromise that we should be working on. But when it comes to things that really come down to our principles, rule of law, right? Things that we're going to say, well, they could do it if we need to stand up for something. And I think that's what is the right thing to do. But I think that's what folks want. I think they want Democrats who are going to stand for something and push back when we get to those points.
We have in 4 candidates at least who have announced that they're planning to run in this race, including, of course, Christina Bohannon, who came very close last time to beating Mariannette Miller-Meeks. So, what is your case to primary voters for why should they vote for you, who they may know less about, rather than Christina Bohannon, who was very close, even in a kind of bad presidential year for Democrats, was very close to beating Miller-Meeks?
Yeah, yeah. So what we have heard, time and time again from when we've been out talking with people in the places like I mentioned, like Warren County, Des Moines County, Scott County, Muscatine, and beyond, is that folks are really looking to turn the page on what has happened in our district in terms of the destruction wrought by politicians in Washington like Miller Meeks. They're looking for new ideas, right? They're looking for a fresh voice. But most importantly, they're looking for somebody, I think, who will use that voice to represent all of the areas of the district and really focus on driving things from the ground floor up. And that's what we promise. We're not gonna be outworked. We're gonna spend our time really on the ground everywhere in all of the district and listening to all voices. And I think in that way, we'll be able to bring forward the policies that are most reflective of all the folks in the district and we'll be ready to take positions that we believe in that are driven actually by conversations with people in that sort of way. And I think if we are committed to that, if we're committed to listening to all folks in the district, all across the district, and doing something that's driven from the ground floor up, we'll be best prepared come 2026 to beat Miller Meeks.
I need to ask a campaign finance nerd question because
Yeah.
I just, as a matter of editorial policy, I don't like reporting on anybody's fundraising numbers based on a press release. So you had announced raising $175,000, I think, in the first day. Roughly, can you give me a ballpark? How much of that money can be spent before the primary and how much is restricted that could only be spent during the general election campaign, provided
The
that you win the primary?
Yeah, the vast majority of that could be used within the primary. And we've also, I mean, from that number, we've also seen a phenomenal amount of growth in this past week. We don't take anything for granted,
Mhm.
but I think we've really gotten a lot of support from folks already, all across the district, and are really excited to be able to continue to build on that and continue to provide policies that listen to folks and are responsive to that.
Mhm. Is there anything I didn't ask that you think would be important for my readers to know, either about you or about your campaign?
I think you mostly covered most of what we're trying to get at. I mean, I think we're trying to have a campaign that's more reflective of all the areas of the district. We're trying to have a campaign that deals with the concerns of Iowans that are really going unaddressed in terms of this historic affordability crisis, in terms of standing up for healthcare, including rural healthcare, like where I'm from. We're trying to have a campaign that makes sure that our commitment to seniors and retirees lasts beyond the 90 years that we made so far, and a commitment that really, campaign that really responds to making sure we have a fair and equal society for all people's rights to be protected. This is important to me. It's important to my wife, and it's important, I think, as we think about the future of Iowa that we want to have for our kids. So I just be grateful for all the folks out there who would be willing to listen to us and speak with us. We'll be coming to your town soon, and I'm excited to hear your voices and be able to continue to meet and work with you.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate the chance to speak with you.
All right.